Dear Michelle Obama, can you please run for president? Because the person in the White House is very rude and very mean and very racist. And we need a girl person in the White House. There has never been a girl person in the White House as a president. And so your husband has already been president, and it could be a family thing. So your kids could be a famous person, and they could be a person that is a president. So next election, please be a person to be elected, because you need to be a person in a famous place, and you would be a more famous person in the White House. So I hope you like my reason. So please run for president whenever you want. So please be president. Dear everyone in the world, we should have more fun at school. We can spend half the day learning and half the day playing. No math. And we should be able to cheat. We can bring our pets and our tablets to school, teachers only in certain rooms, more ice cream at lunch and hot chocolate in the winter. We have a right to have fun. Fun is in the needs. Fun can help kids learn better. Kids need fun to create their imagination. Dear future vampire self, how is it like being a vampire? Do you have any werewolf friends? Dear 29-year-old self, how is your flying unicorn puppy spaceship, if you have one? Have your parents finally agreed to let you be a lawyer's rude person so you can argue about dogs all day long? I assume you have already adopted 20 dogs, and they have grown wings and started a sweets shop, and that you have a cotton candy hot tub, lollipop chocolate, and sweet tub. Dear Donald Trump, I don't like what you think about the wall because my grandpa was going to come visit me, but he can't. Can't see my grandpa and grandma. I see the news every day to see if you change. I also pray every day to see if you change, but you won't. I want to be the president so I can take down the wall. I know you might be mad if I take down the wall, but I want to see my family. Dear nothing, please become something. This is Arts Educators Save the World, where successful artists and their mentors talk about how arts education transformed their lives. Welcome to Arts Educators Save the World, a podcast where artists and their mentors talk about the impact of arts education on both their lives. Today is an Alec and Erica chat. Hi, Alec.
Hello, Erica.
And we're going to talk about joy, so I'm bringing the joy.
Let's do it. There is a section of the book, this is page 21, if you're following along in your hymnal, and it's called Bring the Joy. I'll say it right now, I'm pro-joy. I do think it is, it seems to be a hip and happening word right now, but it's a great way to describe what is important in life. You need your food, your health, your shelter, and all that, but you deserve more than that. You need your food, your health, your shelter, and to have joy. But while I think it's like, duh, people should be happy, I'm not sure that is on top of mind as curriculum writers are sitting around discussing what they're going to create, or educators or administrators are talking about what school is. So I think this is something else in your book that is not so quietly revolutionary, that maybe education should be about joy. Tell me, I know you disagree. Tell me what you think about
Disagree. And I actually think it's good that for you, Alex, specifically to say you're pro-joy, because we joke about how you're kind of a curmudgeon, right? And
less so. But yes.
But I think it's important, right? Because joy doesn't always mean like silly, lighthearted, foolish, right? Joy is a feeling of accomplishment and knowing that your contributions matter. I'm not the only education scholar right now to be writing and talking about this, There's a fantastic scholar at the University of Illinois, Chicago, Guldi Muhammad, who has a book called Cultivating Joy, which is a really beautiful treatise on Black joy and how the stripping away of joy and freedom and choice making from Black bodies is one of the main reasons why kids of color continue to struggle in schools, because the things that bring kids joy, particularly kids who, for whatever reason, don't feel like they're part of the mainstream conversation, those things are systematically stripped out of our system, of what we think counts. Something as simple as the capacity to move your body. You know, school is often so much about learning to control your physical movements, and movement brings joy. And there's lots of reasons for that, but one of them, the one primary one with respect to school, is about control, right? There's so much time and effort spent on controlling the choices that kids make with their bodies, with what they study, with how they study, with which aspects of themselves they bring to the studying, don't use that word, use this other word. Don't use this pencil, use this other kind of pencil. Only get up to sharpen your pencil when you have permission. There's all of this control, and it's almost like joy is the antithesis of control in some ways, without sounding too, dystopian. My particular brand of joy is grounded in silliness. I mean, I love a dumb joke. I love a poop joke. I love, the kind of silly making that makes people feel good together. But as you heard in those letters that we read, sometimes joy is quite serious. It's about expressing something that you haven't had permission to express before, and being given space to do that and seeing the range, right? Joy is like a vampire with werewolf friends, but joy is also being able to see your grandparents who can't cross the border because there's both a real and a psychological wall between you and your family members.
Right. I think that, first of all, just to put a pin, I think that this is why I love Monty Python so much, because it is intensely intelligent silliness.
Yeah.
It is the height of stupidity told by brilliant people. And that balance, I think, says is everything I need in life. I like the way you're saying this, that joy, and I do agree, is a maybe fulfillment, momentary fulfillment. And that, yes, for me, that is sitting in front of a computer with just the right iced latte and just the right coffee shop, working on something very difficult that I'm struggling with. That's joy there. I don't need it to be easy. I don't need to be jumping for joy. That's not where it comes from. And right, like you're saying, when as an adult, and we're all agreeing that kids and adults aren't the same, but they are on a spectrum of humans. They are not the dividing line. Where you put in the dividing line, it should not be a clear one. And so what joy do you find when someone tells you when you can eat and where you can sit and what words you can use for this? That's not ever going to result in joy. And I definitely have talked to Sarah, my wife, about this all the time, of like, just the idea, we're so used to school, and like we've all been to school, and like we've seen school on the TV machine, but like just the idea that you go from not being someone that sits in a room for X amount of time in a chair to being that's really hard. Yeah. And if the transition is a 180, is a bright line of now it must be like this, and to think of how different that is from the true theater making process that you're going through that is so open and experimental right from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, and I'm involved in a research study right now with some colleagues here where we're looking at our artist in residence programs, Whoop and Soccer included, and we're trying to study what's called social and emotional learning. And we're trying to look at what kinds of social and emotional learning skills and practices can we see through participation in these different kinds of arts programs. And one of the things that we noticed when we interviewed kids, asking them about their experiences, is that they repeatedly used the word fun to describe their experiences, even though we didn't ask them. There was no question in the interview that was like, what was fun? They repeatedly used this word fun. So we dug a little deeper into like, what is fun connected to for them, right? Because I think we write off kids. If they say it's fun, it must not be difficult. If they say it's fun, it must not be real work. If they say it's fun, right? And it turns out that actually kids refer to things as fun that have exactly the characteristics that we're hoping for. In our study, a lot of kids connected fun with collaboration. Like about a third of the time when they said something was fun, they said it was working with my friends, performing with my friends, writing with a partner, activities that involve doing things together. They talked about this idea of agency. I could write what I wanted. I could make dances up the way I wanted. I could play the rhythm the way I wanted. So this kind of sense of agency. And this Sarah will appreciate probably more than anyone else, some of the kids recreated what is known as the zone of proximal development, which is a famous idea in child development that is that kids work best when they are working just beyond what they can do on their own. So if it's something that a task they can easily complete on their own, that's not particularly helpful for learning. If something is way too hard, that is also not helpful for learning because you're not going to quite get there. And so you need to be in this zone of things that you can do with assistance. And kids literally said things like, it wasn't easy, but it wasn't hard. It was the right amount of easy and hard. It was fun. Like literally recreating the experience of this theory by articulating that something is fun when it's not something I can do by rote, but it's not something that I just give up on. It's like the right amount of challenge for me.
That describes perfectly my relationship to YouTube how-to videos.
Yeah.
That when it comes
Piaget would be so proud.
I'm glad he would.
Of YouTube.
Whether it's through, usually it has to do with editing, video editing, or coffee making. I'm looking exactly for that. I'm looking for the video that just takes me slightly to the next step, and I know when it's way too far along. I also have this.
Yeah.
I'm into physics, and I say that haltingly because again, it's like I want a tiny bit of physics. I need just outside of my range, and as soon as you give me like an equation, I'm done. That's 4 steps ahead. It's not fun anymore.
Yep.
I want fun.
Yep. You want fun, which is not too easy because then you can just kind of do it and it doesn't provide any sort of challenge or opportunity for failure or whatever. But if it's like, F it, I don't know, then that's not fun either.
Right.
So, I've moved a little from joy to fun, but I think joy is what I'm noticing. And this is not the like scientific part of the study, but this is sort of something joy is the word that grownups use. Fun is the word that kids use.
Right.
But I think they mean the same thing in the context of this conversation.
Right. So tell me how all this fits in. We these letters that we were hearing were from this Make a Change week. Tell me how all this fits together.
Yeah. So one of the residency weeks that we do in Whoop and Soccer is we work as a class to identify things in the world that we would like to be different. And we give a range of options. So those could be made up things. So like we've spent some time building this imaginary world called Whoop and Soccer City. And kids can write about like, I want, and the sort of conceit is that I'm the mayor of Whoop and Soccer City and me, Erica, is the mayor. And sometimes kids are curious about that. And they're like, what do you mean there's a mayor? Who is that? Why does she get to be the mayor? Right? So sometimes kids will want to, make a change to the like election system of Whoop and Soccer City.
Yeah.
Or, if this version of Whoop and Soccer City has a giant chocolate volcano, right? They'll want to, make some environmental changes to make sure that the chocolate volcano doesn't completely, melt down. So there's kind of imaginary changes, but there's also changes that you might want to make more broadly, like in the Michelle Obama letter, right? Of like, oh, I would like my broader world to be different. And then often we get, I want my local world to be different, right? So we've had like lots and lots of, we should be allowed to bring our pets to school, right? And here's why that would help us or make us feel better. So all of that is a mechanism toward this concept of agency and choice in expression, right? That you can use writing as a mechanism to take agency over the world that you live in, especially because, as we've said, kids have so little agency in their day, in school and out of school, but especially in school. And a sort of secret ninja move that we make is we often use those kinds of expressions in performance, which validates them, right? So we're not actually contacting Michelle Obama, but by sharing with a public audience that this is a particular interest that a kid has and a change that they want to make, it takes the next step from just, I have expressed it, to I have expressed it, and now a group of adult professionals are validating that this is a reasonable thing to express. And to put it it's a purposeful choice for us to put that range of ideas alongside one another, right? To say, and if you're not a kid that's particularly political, which I would say also this is a reflection of the university town that I live in, and that kids are thinking and talking. This was in 2019, those letters were written. So kids were thinking and talking about presidential politics, third graders, in 2019. It's a reflection of where we live, but also that you don't have to be a political kid to express agency, right? You can express agency about your imagined future self or about, how school could be different.
Mm-hmm. So what is last week we talked about, or last time we talked, it was about group work, and you mentioned that at some point then there's individual work. Is that what this is? Is this, and how does it wind up on stage? What's the process?
Yeah, these are mostly individual pieces. We typically do this work closer to the end of the residency, where kids have built up some confidence and skills around coming up with their own ideas and expressing them. We actually play a game that I love during this day called Continuum, where the teaching artists come up with a series of statements and ask kids to physically line up in the classroom around like agree, neutral, disagree, so that they can see the range of choices that kids make. And some of the things are silly, like, pizza and chicken nuggets, right? Pizza
Right.
over here, chicken nuggets over here, middle over here. And then we act like reporters and we go around and have the kids say kind of why are you standing over here? And often like some of the things are polarized and you'll have like one or two kids in the middle. So you go to the kids in the middle and say like, bold choice, like, what, how did you get over here? And, some of them are more serious. Like we often will do like year-round school, summer break, neutral. And kids have really different opinions about that and about like, what they feel like would be the best for them. And so that then gets them into the kinds of arguments and changes and ideas that they have for themselves. And we perform these in the same way that we perform any piece. Sometimes we translate that. Sometimes they lend themselves well to a narrative. Sometimes they lend themselves to just a direct reading. In that particular series of letters, Dear Nothing, Please Become Something was turned into a song where we physically embodied nothing to something as performers. So the adaptations of the arguments, the changes, the letters end up at looking as diverse as fiction story adaptations, depending on how the artists are feeling like a translation of that story would best communicate the ideas to the audience.
So I think you say in the book that what you think encapsulates all of this for you is one of the lines in one of the pieces there, which is of course the fun is in the needs. So
Yes.
why do you highlight that? Tell me about that.
I mean, first of all, isn't that just a great encapsulation of humanity? Fun is in the needs. I love that it highlights exactly what you said at the beginning, which is it's not just nice to have joy, it's necessary. It's a necessary condition for being successful human beings together. And to me, fun is in the needs captures that necessary condition, right? As opposed to fun is nice to have.
Right.
It's good to have fun sometimes, but only after you do the hard things. So I love that it captures so clearly and directly the kind of Maslow's hierarchy of it all.
It's also a great just bit of poetry. Just like those words in that order. That's quite something. I mean, that's not an easy phrase to translate. You need to kind of do a little bit of work for it. I mean, we're the, not to get all patriotic here, but life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It says it right there in our rule book here, which is
that's right.
Really rare. In fact, I think unique among countries' founding documents. And it says we can be happy, and it's not. And I don't think that happiness meant jumping around. Now, of course, obviously, we had some major problems at the beginning there for who got to be happy, but pursuit of happiness. Let me ask this before we end today. What I'm very curious about is is this whole thing? How resistant to this, your whole philosophy here, is American education in the large, which is a difficult question because we've got tens of millions of students and school districts and schools. But are you on the fringe? Are you, I feel, in my house, certainly social emotional learning is part of everyday conversation. And it's, and culturally responsive teaching, and these things are part of, but if someone's listening going, is this what American education is like? Is it what everyone hopes it would be like? Where are we in 5 minutes?
Well, I think as I'm sure we've talked about at some point, the arts are often marginalized in mainstream schooling spaces. They are alongside, frankly, things like physical education and health education, and other forms of whole person education. They are often the first to go, right? Because we have this, I think, ill-informed idea that basics need to come before complex interaction. And I don't think that does not map on to any of the research we have on how people learn to do stuff. That said, I think we as a society, we are more and more aware that education stretches far beyond schooling. So we have started to embrace this notion of education or learning as happening in an ecology, and including things like informal learning spaces like museums and public libraries and after-school programs and summer programs and all of the different kinds of organizations, and frankly, learning with families at home, learning the cultural and historical traditions and practices of your community and of your family. My mother-in-law is super good at sewing, and she has taught not only her grandkids, but some of my younger friends to sew, right? Because it's a practice that she has done her entire life. And, there are not really many sewing classes left. It's hard. Maybe you have like an elective in middle school that you could do sewing, but it's not really there anymore. So I think culturally we're more and more aware of that. I think, unfortunately, that requires additional resources that some communities just don't have. And so the question of, do we take our limited financial and cultural resources and invest them in the ecology, or do we continue to invest them directly into schools, but then continue to expect schools to be all things to all people at all times, which is it's just unfair, right? It's unfair to ask of one individual institution that it do all of those things. And I think that American high schools are better at this than American elementary schools. I think American elementary schools are in a place right now where people are very worried about global competition and, quote unquote, catching kids up who are behind, which is bizarre to me that any 5-year-old could be behind. Because, you're 5. How could you be behind? What does that even mean?
Yeah.
But, I think elementary schools, ironically, are in many ways more constrained than high schools, because by high school, kids have some choice. There's more specialization. You can have a full-time, art, metals, and glass teacher at your high school who can represent a full suite of practices and ideas for kids who are interested. So I don't know if I totally answered your question. I think, there is more awareness now. I don't know that that's translated into permanent policy shifts, but I think people are aware that opportunities to make different things in different ways with different people is a really important part of being an educated person.
And if you agree with Erica, one way that we hope that you'll do your part is share this podcast. Share this podcast with your friends. Rate and review if you like this thing on Apple Podcasts and everywhere else that you can do that. If you want to send in your thoughts, your support, your ideas, your questions, please do so at contact@artseducation. Oh, I almost had it in one, but I couldn't remember the domain. So close. Contact@artseducatorspodcast. No.
Yes.
Is it?
Yes.
Yes. It's ridiculous. Contact@artseducatorspodcast.com.
Yes, please.
Yes, please. And I think that's all for this week, Erica.
Onward together.
Arts Educators Save the World is hosted by Erica Rosenfeld Halverson and produced and co-hosted by me, Alec Lev. Our executive producer is Doug Matica, and our audio producer is Justin Asher. Special thanks to our collaborators, the brilliant and talented Kate Baldwin, and our great friends at Story Pirate Studios, Lee Overtree, Benjamin Salka, and Amy Fiore. Original music is by Dan Lipton, and our artwork is by Lyra Evans. Check out our website designed by Cole Locasio at www.artseducatorspodcast.com. We're on Instagram @artseducatorspodcast, and you can write to us with your questions and comments at contact@artseducatorspodcast.com. You can also find us at a place called YouTube. And wherever you're listening, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review. It really helps the show. We're proud to be sponsored in part by the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the Gibb Faculty Fellowship. Arts Educators Save the World was created by Erica Rosenfeld Halverson and Alec Lev.